Hey everyone, I think we're live. Quick sound check, drop me a okay if you can hear me all right. There's rain on the roof, so hopefully you can't hear that too loud, or if the music's too loud. So just let me know it's all clear. Who have we got in the house? Josh and KK, hi. Kelly, hi, I'll read your question in a moment. Hi Anne, Sean, Joan, Mike number 2. I hear you. Okay, sound is good. Thanks guys, appreciate it. All good here, excellent. Kelly's one. I was wondering if you tell us anything you've learned about whether or when the Taiji and Kung Fu weapons we started to train would have been used martially in China. The jian, the double-edged sword, has a long history. And so all of the Kung Fu and Taiji kind of systems would have embraced weaponry from the beginning. So perhaps that would be an article for a blog or Waffle to talk about the history of the sword. That's a great question. I can't off the top of my head know when the modern sort of swords as we know them now, because if you look at the history, the battlefield history, I've got plenty of books on the subject, so I can do a bit of delving, and I'll get back to you on that one. I can't tell you off the top of my head. But also the sword had a long history of being used in the for performance in the opera and the stage performances of the sword, the double-edged sword particularly, which would have had a big impact on the Taiji. A lot of the postures in the Taiji sword form come from that tradition. And the dao, the single-edged sword, was more of a basic battlefield weapon that was used by the sort of the foot soldiers. But yeah, thanks for that. I'll get back to you on that. Okay, so we have a ton. Wait for the next blog. Yeah. Jonesy, nice to have you with us. Do you listen for distinct sound the blade mates cutting through the air to make sure your cutting strokes have correct blade alignment? That is massively important, and something I'm going to be talking about in the hope the music's not too loud for you guys, it's not cutting me off, but that's something I'm going to be talking about in the lessons for the sword. The Taiji sword is different because the form is done at Taiji speed. You don't get that noise happening, which you would do if you were cutting with kind of speed, but the sound is absolutely critical, yes. And I will try to demonstrate that. That will be a challenge to do that online with the microphone and so on. I'm going to have a go at that. Thank you for that suggestion. I'll film a couple this week with the microphone and see how clear. In reality, when you're holding it, it's clear as day. So you guys haven't disappointed me this week. I got sent tons of questions. And I'm going to go through them. Could you please measure the blade and hilt length of your sword so I can get an idea of dimension? Traditional sword length to body side ratios. Cutting the air or slapping are very different. Yeah. Okay, Jonesy. Yeah, we'll talk about that. I'll get to you on that. Everyone in China use a dao. If you have a willow leaf broadsword, which is the most easily findable broadswords, it's fine to do the set with that. I would have taught it with that, except I only have the gimdal, dan gimdal here, so that's why I demonstrated with that. But in class, any kind of broadsword is fine. Right, please bear with me because my iPad's locked me out. Here we go. I'm not gonna get through all these questions because there's a whole heck of a lot. Fujao sent me 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 questions, 7 questions. Dave sent me a question. Thanks for that, Dave. Sean as well. Thank you for that. And Steve Jonesy last week sent me a whole bunch of really excellent questions as well. So I'm gonna get through some of these. And as I go with them, you guys type any follow-up questions or anything that's not clear, okay? I'm going to start with Fuzhou. Okay, in the lineage you learn, do you do the pillar sets of Hongar? If not, which sets do you do? Any differences with, say, Lamzhou or Lamsawing lineages? Okay. Hongar, the pillar set. I know they talk about in the Lamzhou lineage, they talk about 4, but Hongar, the pillar set, is what is mainly known as Gongji Fufukun, or my Sifu used to call Seng Gong Fufukun, which is that's the main set. That's really Hongkun. And in the southern Shaolin from Honghegun was the Gongji Fufukun. And then from somewhere through the Tikyu Sam lineage was the Tisinkun. Those 2 are the original ones. And they've been passed down in most of the lineage. So in the Lam Sai Wing, they have 2 extra sets, which is Fuhok Sung Kun, which is a combination of Hopgar and Hongar. That's from Wong Fei Hong. And then later was added the Sup Yin Kun, which is 5 animals, 5 elements. Sup Yin Kun is, as I spoke to people from that lineage, and what they explained to me is Sup Yin Kun is basically the best bits of the other 3 sets put into one. So it's kind of like the best of. It's like one of those albums where there's like the best of albums. So that's Sup Yin Kun. It's like bits of Tisin, bits of Gongji, bits of Fu Hop. So Sup Yin Kun's later, and it's a compilation. Tisin is the internal form. Gongji is the basics and the fighting set, and then Fu Hok adds some concepts from Hupkun and a few other places. That's kind of like, they call Dakgar, so that's like a blend of different sets. So in my Sifu system, Sengong Fufukun was taught. One that's kind of in our lineage, that's not in the Lam Sai Wing lineage, is called Zhongda Kun, which is the short bridge, high stance, short range Hongkun set. Now, Tisin, so this is an interesting thing. In the Lam Sai Wing lineages, Tisin is taught last. It's like the epitome, it's the advanced set. In my Sifu's granddaddy's time, Tisin was taught first. Because, and it's 2 ways of thinking about it, okay? Because, I don't know, in Gong Fu, it tends to be the stuff you learn first, you tend to come back to it later and go, oh, I was missing this. So you tend to find that the real treasures are often hidden at the beginning in the fundamentals, because it's why you got to train them for so long. And the Tisin was, because it's a slow, there's tension, breathing, different sounds, and different types of breath and noises and so on. But because it's slow, it's not good for performance because it doesn't look flashy. It doesn't require real speed and athleticism. It could be done by anybody. So in one sense, it's not advanced. Okay, and in that sense, I hope that Taiji people don't take this the wrong way. But in that sense, it's similar to Taiji. Taiji is accessible. You don't need to be athletic, fit. Anyone can do Taiji. However, to do Taiji well is more difficult than to do most of the other Kung Fu styles well, because it so uses your mind, because it's using your consciousness, and that takes the longest. So Tisin is like that. It's the most basic and it's the most advanced at the same time. So some lineages will teach it first, some lineages will teach it last. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, Josh. Second question. I've heard you mention the tiger crane form in class with the other students. Hupgar form, yeah, Fu Hok Sung Dao. Fu Hok Sung Dao is different to Fu Hok Sung Ying. Fu Hok Sung Dao is Wong Yan Lam. Fu Hok Sung Ying, Wong Fei Hong. Okay, so different. Just got the characters tiger and crane is in them, but they're not the same set. They're not related. Similarities, differences as well. It's quintessentially Hopkun. Third question. Some Hongar lineages have a 5 animals, 5 elements. So that's what we're talking about, Sup Yin Kun. We have a shorter 18 movement form that shows the animals with the elements, 3 moves per animal, following the constructive Wu Xing cycle. We call Mhang. In my lineage, we call that Mhang. I've noticed that Hongar has no elemental ideas. I wonder if sometimes give the animals different elemental values. or separate them completely? Thoughts on any of that? History, medicine, combat, etc. I need to be... Thoughts on that? It's added after. And hi, Christine. It's added afterwards. And in my opinion, there's no combative advantage to using that kind of thinking. It seems fair because you've got the 5 elements of creation and destruction. So therefore you can say, okay, he's using a wood technique, therefore I'm using a metal technique and I split the wood. Okay, he's using a fire technique, therefore I throw water and I use a water technique to put out the fire. You can think that way, but assigning those to specific techniques is not the way to go, in my opinion. It's more like, okay, this is my take, so take it for what it's worth. This is personal, just from my own. It's the application, the feeling can be brought into any technique. So therefore, it's possible to do the same technique and express any element, depending on whether you're doing it with a fire or a metal, wood, work, or whatever. So let's be a bit more realistic and down to earth about it. Let's say one aspect, like suppressing, like covering something. So that can be, you could be say it's like water putting out the fire. You could look at that as, say, a person's trying to punch you, like, very ferocious, and you tie them up, you clinch, you're heavy, you're sinking, you take them down. That could be an example of that. But trying to be too kind of mystical about it is more a marketing ploy. I don't think that's very, otherwise you'll say, oh, he's using this technique, I have to use that technique. It doesn't work. Doesn't work that way. General principle, though, you can say this, look, and this is borne out by real fights. This isn't really contentious to say that, generally speaking, if someone's using kickboxing, you wrestle them, okay? And if someone's, on top, a wrestler, you use jiu-jitsu. If you're underneath, you use joint locks. And if somebody's grabbing you, trying to do joint locks, you punch them. So that's more like rock, scissors, paper, right? So no one is better than the other. 5 element is the same thing. It's just instead of 3, there's 5, but no one's better than the other. It's just a round. So you say this element's better. Well, no, this can be, but then this can be, and then you've got the destructive cycle. So I think it's more of I think take it more as an analogy and just say it means anything can be beaten by anything. You've just got to train harder. So I wouldn't. It's different if you're talking about medicine, selection of herbs or acupuncture points. That's different because you're in control of that, right? The person is hopefully compliant with that, so it works. Jonesy, to paraphrase Tyson, philosophy goes out the window, you get punched in the face. And there's also somebody that said, I think it was a military strategist that said, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And there's also a wonderful scientific, might have been Richard Feynman, who said, many a beautiful theory was spoiled by an ugly fact. I like that one. Okay, next question. I believe you once said you teach Hapgar first in the normal school, Hongar after. Any reasoning for this? No, I don't think there's any reason why you have to do. It makes sense, in my opinion, if I'm teaching just generally, and I had to. If I was teaching an individual, okay, would you start with Taiji? Would you start with Hapkun? Would you start with Honkun? That's an individual choice, okay? As I know from teaching, most people in the West tend to be kind of stiff, tight. It's better for me to teach the Hapkun first and get them flexible, because if you start with the Honkun, it's hard to open. Because everything becomes kind of set and strong, and it's difficult to get the flexibility. Or if you start with the bigger movements and open, it's relatively easy to bring it in. So that's why I teach it that way. But I'm not saying that's right for everyone. But if you have a school curriculum, you have to choose something, because you can't. It's impractical to have a class where everyone's doing different stuff. If I was teaching a small group, rather than I had a school where we had at one point 3 classrooms running simultaneously, and then every hour there's a different group of people. So there's 9 or 10 classes a night. You have to have a very structured curriculum. So level 1, level 2, level 3. So it necessitates that kind of traditional Kung Fu was taught like just to a few people. Like one Sifu would have like a handful of students. And so in that respect, you could say, right, you work on this, and maybe people would learn in different order, but people now have the idea everything has to be, which has its uses, but it has its disadvantages as well. So just practical reasons, there's no specific. Next question. I'm a fan of Hong Gar, but I like the footwork in Hub Gar. Yeah, me too. At least the way I've learned it. We did not do a lot of footwork drills. When you learned Hong Gar, did they focus a lot on footwork? I'll explain that. Learn to learn good footwork through Western boxing, MMA, Zingi Bagua, Philippine. So, okay, traditionally in Hong Gar, there's not a lot of footwork. It was more about they call Yat Ma, which is your stance has to go into your opponent's stance. So you have to use what they call Bik Q, which is crush. Bik is like, how do you translate that into English? Some people say crowding, but I think it's like, if you've got a busy train with lots of people and you're all squashed up, that's big, compressed. So when you're fighting somebody, you're trying to get into their stance and compress them so that they're on their heels, and you're using your bridges. That's the kind of fighting theory of the Hong Kong. So it's not about fighting from a distance and using stepping. It's about getting in and then bridging. So for that reason, it doesn't use a lot of evasive steps. I know there are in the Tiger Crane form, but that comes from the Hop Koon. So the Hop Koon is more about evasion, invasion. Evasion, so when the opponent's attack's coming, stepping so you get out of the way, and then getting in, okay? Tai Chi, those of you guys who are doing Tai Chi, is a different idea again. Tai Chi is sticking and connecting. Again, so footwork in Tai Chi is not about moving like a boxer, but it's about putting your feet where, in response to the opponent's force, because you're already in contact. So it might be the footwork in Tai Chi is more like yielding, stepping to accommodate the force, and then coming in at a different angle. So it's that kind of thing. If you look at the Tai Chi Sanshao, the 2-person routine, there's a lot of switch stepping back, stepping forward, stepping back, stepping forward, moving out. So we use in Tai Chi called Dalu, which means big rollback. But there is a connection. So in that respect, similar to Hong Kong. So Hup Koon is going to use very different footwork. I don't think you can plug the Hup Koon footwork into the Hong Kong bridges. It's two different operating systems. You could certainly use the Hup Koon like before the engagement, and then once you get into the clinch, you could then use the Tai Chi energies, for example. Some people think it's sacrilege to mix them like that, but I found it works very well. One more question. Hopgar fist. I feel that I cannot reliably hit safely with full power as opposed to a traditional folded thumb fist. Just a lack of training or combat. Combat use of leopard's fist and crane's beak. Big questions, right. Could not reliably hit with full power. I don't feel this makes much difference to this. If you look at a modern boxing glove, the thumb's there. So when you're punching with the thumb there, I don't think that makes too much. I don't think this makes this less or more. I get the idea to kind of pack it in. We do that in the Hong Kong with the thumb. For the kind of striking that we do in Hop Koon, I like this. But the advantage of this is that when you do your gua cups, you don't have to move your thumb out of the way. So if you're hitting over the top, you hit here. You haven't got to mash your thumb. So you haven't got to change hand form depending on what angle you're hitting. It's the same hand form. So hit the bags with it. Just hit the bags. It will make sense. Leopard fist and crane's beak. I'm going to be contentious again. People aren't going to like this. Leopard's fist and crane beak are for show. If I'm going to hit someone like this and I do it with a crane's beak, it's not. Okay, so you have to think of these things logically. Try it on a hard, solid object, like a heavy bag, and just see. And you'll find that this is like, beep, beep, you know, whereas using it with the palm, the tiger claw, the fist in certain, but even the fist, if you're hitting like to the back of the head or something, you can break your hand. So the strongest is the palm or the tiger claw. These are the strongest. But if you're hitting soft tissues, you need to use a harder object, like a hammer. So to get that kind of impact, you use your knuckles. Okay, because if you hit with a palm, it doesn't have the same braking force. But if you're hitting a hard target, palm. So therefore, let's say, good to get in the eye. Well, yeah, sure, agreed. Hop guard fist, you're still pressing down. Yes, there's a squeeze. There's a squeeze. Okay. So yeah, you say good to get in the eyes. Okay, if you're close and you're there anyway, you're just, yeah, for sure. That's what we call the tiger claw. So you've got your palm, and then you've also got your fingers, which kind of fit into the eyes. If you do this, and the guy moves his head a fraction, and you hit here, does nothing. If I do this, I may miss the eyes by a fraction. I've still broke the nose with the palm. So this is going to hurt and doesn't require pinpoint accuracy. So cup choi, this part. If you're hitting this area, this part. Leopard fist, okay, the idea being to hit the throat or something like that. It takes a lot of training, it's possible. Heck, this is possible. You can hit acupuncture points with your finger, it's possible, but you're talking a high amount of training. And here's the question, could you better spend that training time doing something else? That's the real question. If it takes 10 years of training to train this needle finger, and now you have this, you know, you can go straight through piercing a target with this, okay? And it's taken you 10 years. And someone else picks up a screwdriver, right? Or one of those tactical pens. They have now got exactly the same ability as you. That is 10 years. That is 1 second. Imagine that person had spent 10 years on sparring, footwork, timing, accuracy, instead of just training a weapon. So my Sifu's belief was you're much better off spending your time on functional skills and then picking something up to improvise as a weapon. And so when you see that, you see a lot of these techniques, and you can imagine if you've got a screwdriver or something, it's going to be horrendous. It's going to be very, very practical. No one would argue with that. But with the bare hand, you know, which is why real Kung Fu people, they pick stuff up. They use whatever's around. So that's part of it. Is there a martial application for the backhand and single whip? Yeah. It's what we call hooking. So when something's coming in and you're hooking it, or if someone's grabbing and you're releasing this way, the whole posture of single whip is meant to represent the Tai Chi is like a balance scale. They say even if a fly lands, the whole thing moves. So it's so delicately balanced that you've got this kind of pivot point. And what you're doing with the single whip is you're sort of acting that out. You're expressing that balance. In application, if someone touches this side, this hand comes out. Someone touches this side, this hand comes out, because you have that down and up, left and right, front and back balance. So the single whip is often held as a standing meditation to kind of extend the energy out and to create that energetic sense of equilibrium, if you like. So the hook is different to the crane's beak. The crane's beak is, the hand is like that, and the force is on here. In the hook, you're dropping. The hook can also be used for hitting with the wrist, this kind of action. So having hooked someone's hand, you can then strike. This works pretty well. He is best. I saw the guy who trained leopard's paw a lot, breaking bricks, etc. His paw still collapsed on slow-mo when hitting a banana tree. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. I've met people who train leopard paw a lot as well. His paw still collapsed on slow-mo. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not saying leopard's paws are not useful. Choi lei fat, they do their chap choi with the leopards. In Hap Kun, we do our chap choi with a regular fist. I'll tell you one story. A Choi lei fat master came to our Kung Fu school one time, and him and my Sifu were discussing this question about, do you extend the knuckles when you punch, or do you keep it in? And his attitude was, this is longer reach, sharper, more impact. So Sifu was like, okay, and he had a sandbag hanging up, and I'm not talking about like a Western style punch bag. This thing was full of sand. It weighed, I don't know, 100 kilos. It took two of us to lift this thing up. It was heavy. When you kicked it with your shin, it was like, oh, it's heavy. And we used to train on that. So he said to the Choi lei fat guy, okay, I know it looks really nice when you're doing it in the air. He said, but go up and hit that bag, and I'll know by the sound it makes whether it's got any power or not. And the guy kind of gingerly went up and sort of felt it a bit first. I would use these knuckles, and my Sifu was like, well, if you're going to use those knuckles, that's why we train that. So that was his argument. No, froze, did it? Can you hear me now? Where did it freeze? Do I have to repeat something? I'll wait for you guys to give me some feedback if you can hear me now. All good now. Right in the middle of the story. So when he got him to hit the sandbag, right? He asked him to hit the sandbag. Okay. He asked him to hit the sandbag full power. He said when he hears the noise of the sand, and this was a really heavy, solid sandbag, and he said when you hit it with the leopard's paw, I'll know by the sound it makes if it's effective. And the guy went up and went to hit it, and he was a little wary, so he tried it lightly first, and then went, oh, this is really hard. He said, I think I would hit it with this knuckle. And my Sifu was like, well, if that's the way you're going to use it in a real fight, that's the way we're going to train it. So that was that story, in case you can't rewind. Okay, Dave's question. I've heard you say Minnoi Jam is a concept that can be applied to multiple forms and training exercises. Could the same be said of Tisin? And you watched my interview with Frank Bolt. Thanks for that. I enjoyed doing that. Could the same be said of Tisin? The way that Minnoi Jam was used in our school and our style and Wong An Lam, as my Sifu explained it to me, Minnoi Jam was the concept needling cotton. So when you're practicing the set very soft, but inside is strong, like Tai Chi, that was needling cotton. Okay, so you can practice any of your Hap Kun sets in the needling cotton style. So essentially, that's what Tai Chi has done. It's taken the northern Shaolin and has emphasized the softness. So it's a practice method. I wouldn't say Tisin is the same. The idea of Tisin, so you've got this iron thread, so you're stretching it and bending it in various ways, and so it has this idea. Some people say that might relate to iron, and thread might relate to needle and cotton. Possible, it's reasonable, but that's not how they use it. That's not how they talk about it now. So I can only say about now. They usually Tisin, how the Hong Kong people use it now. They're usually referring to a specific sequence as opposed to a training principle. But of course, Tisin within the set has training principles, so that's a complicated answer, but that's the best I can do. Sean's question. Kinetic linking. Talk a little bit about it and suggest some titles for reading on the subject. Okay, so I would maybe reading on the subject. You could go into sports science and reading physics textbooks and stuff. That's pretty heavy. I would suggest YouTube because there's some good stuff. There's Fight Science. That would be a good one to watch. And because they're talking about, sports scientists are talking about what they call kinetic linking, which is, what that means is, I'll talk a little bit about that. In the old Taiji texts, it talks about a principle called threading the pearls. So imagine you've got a string of pearls and there are 9, and you're putting a thread through the 9 pearls. You're connecting them all with a thread. And so in the Taiji classics, it says that using your mind, so if you're putting a thread through a pearl, first thing is your mind has to go first and the thread has to go second. You can't just kind of do that. You'll miss. You have to lead it. You have to lead. So in the Taiji, you would say that the mind goes first, the thread is the chi, and the pearls are the joints. So the 9 pearls will be starting from the ground, the ankle, knee, and hip, which is the leg. Then you've got 3 points in the spine, which is, they correspond to 3 acupuncture points, so lower, middle, and upper spine. And then the arm, shoulder, elbow, and wrist. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3 in the leg. So if you imagine, say, throwing a punch, a good punch starts from the floor. The leg drives, the waist turns, and it follows with the hand, and the power comes out. Now, they speak about this in Taiji, traditional Taiji. They say that it's rooted in the leg, directed by the waist, expressed in the hands. Now, this is actually pretty darn sophisticated, because this stuff was hundreds of years ago they wrote about this. And this was before there wasn't a scientific explanation. And I don't think, we can't take it entirely as being a scientific explanation, but it's pretty sophisticated. And then a few years ago, sports science started using this terminology called kinetic linking. So with the kinetic energy, what will happen is, in martial art we call that fajing or fatging in Cantonese, is that release of power, the issuing of power. And where the power is incorrect or leaks or goes the wrong way, or the muscle's not tight enough so it loses power, so there has to be a series of relaxation and tension. So each muscle can either be tense or relaxed, but the important thing is it has to fire in a sequence to propagate the power from the ground out. Now, if you think about a wave traveling through water, it's exactly the same. The water just goes up or down, but the wave propagates. So the same thing when you throw a punch, each muscle just tenses or relaxes, but the timing has to be that the wave propagates from the ground to the hand. So that's what they mean by threading the pearls. So when you're doing your Taiji using your mind, you're using your consciousness to lead the chi, and then that will direct the power. So in other words, using more scientific terminology, you're consciously integrating the movement by going slowly and feeling the connection to build up a kind of a neural pathway that, when it's expressed fast, can efficiently direct power. Now, if you look on sports, what's it called? There's a YouTube video called Fight Science, and they show a boxer throwing a punch, and they show a ultra high speed camera, and then they slow it down. It's very high resolution. And the coolest thing is this wave, which you feel when you're doing Taiji, but in real time, it's just too quick, right? But you actually see this wave propagating through the arm as like through the soft tissue. You can actually see it like a wave in the water. And it's so perfect how it comes through the body, you can see it. And if ever, you want to say that the Taiji classics are correct, you could show that video. It's perfect. And if anything was at the wrong time, that wave wouldn't connect through. So that's the difference. Someone can be very strong, can lift heavy weights, and still not be able to punch very hard. That's the difference between Cantonese called lek and ging. Lek is brute strength, and then ging is what we're talking about, this propagation force. You need to have a certain degree of lek before you can have ging. Okay, so if you don't have it, if you're weak, you won't be able to express this power. You need to be strong, but it's not trying to be the strongest guy on the block. You need to be strong enough, but then you need to refine it and direct it. So that's the difference. So thanks for that good question, Sean. I hope that helps. Oh, thanks. Thanks for the yi and zingy. Yeah. Zingy we call Yingyi Kun. Yi is In Chinese medicine, it's related to the spleen. It's the spirit, the shen of the spleen. But the yi is like, some people translate it as consciousness, but it's more like kind of focused intent. And yin yi, yin means shape, shadow, shape. So when you have a movement, there are two parts to it. There's the physical shape of the movement, and then there's the mental intention. When you bring those two together, boom, kung fu. So thanks for that. How are we doing for time? Jonesy sent me some cool questions as well. If you have a book list, sure. There's a, yeah, I'll put it on the blog. I can think of 5 or 6 books, but I'll be honest with you, Sean, I think sometimes the books overcomplicate it. There's a Western teacher, I say Western teacher, he's from Taiwan, Dr. Yang Jingming, but he's a engineer, so he's very scientifically minded. And he produced a book on Tai Chi Fa Jing, and it's got 200 something different Fa Jing movements in it. It's very complex and very, what's the word? Complete study, because he's very academic. But the problem with that is that you end up fixing on all these different, I tried this number 53, number 54, something like that. And really it's all one thing. You're trying to find that connection and then letting it express naturally. So it's good to read it, but I wouldn't study it too methodically. I think it can take you, the really best guys, and this is going to sound really counterintuitive, like if you're talking about single whip, they just hold the position and relax and go into meditation for an hour. And what happens is then the whole body releases the tension and connects through, and the energy, the chi comes out, and then suddenly they can manifest power. And I don't think you can learn it intellectually. It's like riding a bike or something like that. That's my opinion. But still read, because I'm really interested in the subject, so I'll read it. But I'll say it's way, way, way secondary to just hitting a bag or something will teach you about Fa Jing. Jonesy didn't let me down. You sent me a whole bunch of questions last week that I didn't answer because I know you weren't with us last week, Jonesy. So we can do a couple of these today. I'm going to save some for next week as well, because there's so many good ones. Thank you. Let me just read this first one. Yeah, this is good. So the first question is talking about how teachers refine strength as they get older. So it's typical, like for example, in Tai Chi, you'll see you've got more now. Yay! Okay, so if you see in Tai Chi, you'll see, for example, the Yang style that I'm teaching in the academy. You have, I think Yang Cheng-Fu was photographed maybe 3 times in his lifetime. It's not like now when I'm, like me, I'm every week putting videos up. So, I mean, it's like in the old days, there was like three photos of him that you could compare. And they were clearly different, from a young guy, middle-aged, and old man. They were clearly different. I mean, subtly, not totally same postures, but you can see differences. So Jonesy's question, this is kind of important. You get this argument. One says, I learned from this master when he was in his prime, he was fighting, I got the real deal. You learned from when he was older and he was just, past his best before or whatever. And then the other person saying, no. You got the stuff when he was crude. I got it when after the refinement, I got the final level. And so the question is, which is better? And there's a problem. Because if you get a 20-year-old learning Kung Fu Tai Chi from a 70-year-old, the temptation is to try to copy the master's movements, and what he's expressing is the result of 50, 60 years practice. My Sifu is like over 70 years of training. So he's different to when he was 40. He's different. His Kung Fu is different. If I just simply try to copy how he does it now and think, I can shortcut those 30 years by doing it how he does it now, I'll cheat myself. It's like a fake. So example, when you first learn, you do low stances. You build your legs up. You need to build that strength. You see a lot of the older masters doing the forms, they're higher. Well, of course they're higher because maybe they're older, so they haven't got the flexibility, but they're still really strong. Because what's happened is they've started with the basic, and as they've come up, they've retained the strength and they've got the rooting and the connection, so that even they're in a high stance and you push hands with them and they're still really strong and really connected. So the question is, you say, well, if he's better, I'll practice it like him. So you do it in a high stance, but you didn't do all those years of low stances. So you haven't got the Kung Fu. So it will look like the more refined version. This is a problem. It's the difference between the external and internal. You're just copying you talked about the yin yi before, the shape, but you're missing the intention. So the answer is a 20-year-old should do 20-year-old Kung Fu. There's a thing now, they're saying, oh, we're teaching Tai Chi to kids. And you've got these like very young kids trying to do like, it's not correct. They need to be running around, jumping, climbing. They need to be expressing youthful energy. And then later it's refined. It's about refinement. But if you've got really a 20-year-old doing this, what on earth are they going to be doing when they're 70? There's nothing left. You need to have a reserve of strength, a reserve of flexibility, a reserve of balance, and then you refine it. So even though you lose some athleticism as you get older, but you make up for it by the energy, by the chi, if you want to use that terminology. It's a bit like brain cells, right? As you get older, you lose brain cells. Okay, so you might say, right, a 50-year-old compared to a 20-year-old is missing, say, 20%. I'm making the figures up, but you say they're missing 20% of brain cells, but they have about 10 times as many neural connections. So that's the difference between, you've got less actual cells, but you've got more interconnections, which means you understand how things fit together better, right? That's kind of wisdom. So it's a good idea to try and get as much as you can when you're younger learning, because you can learn more like a sponge, and then you refine it, you connect it, so you end up with something which is of a different order of thing. Is it appropriate for a young kid to try and get that? In my opinion, no. So that's a long answer, Jones, to a good question. But in my opinion, it's incorrect. You should try and do it as appropriate for your age. So if you're young, go lower, go harder, go running, lift weights. Don't try to do like old man Tai Chi, because when you're an old man, you won't be like that. You won't be able to do it. How long have we got? Last question. I'll answer the third question because it's an easy one and it won't take me long. Old masters often get their students to teach the young guys for a reason. Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yeah, don't do what I do. Do what I say, not what I do. I think that's actually right. We think it in the West, we think that's wrong, but if it's done in the right way, it's correct. And in the same way, if you're teaching a child arithmetic or something, and you can just do it in one go, but you teach them step 1, step 2, step 3, so they understand it. You can just jump ahead, but it doesn't mean it's right for them. Okay, so I'm going to save one question for next time. In many northern styles, you can see long arm swinging techniques similar to hot guard. Is there a direct connection? Did these northern styles give their swinging arm techniques to Lama fist via the Qingyun temple? I would not be surprised, Jonesy, if the Tongbei Pigua, the northern styles, Tongbei Chuan, Pigua, do they call Pigua Chuan, Pigua Zheng? They have much characteristics similar to Hapkun. I would be really surprised if there wasn't a connection somewhere. I don't have any historical evidence, but I would be super surprised. It's just too darn similar. So if you've seen that and you've said the way that they generate power with the loose, the whipping, quapet, so on, it's really similar. So I would suspect somewhere along the lines, because this stuff, if you go back not that long ago, there was definitely northern influence, definitely. Because if you compare it to the other Cantonese styles, it looks much northern. There's higher kicks. There's these long arm movements. So, but there's no historical, as far as I know, evidence for a connection with the Northern Shaolin. But Pigua looks more like that than the Changchuan, the Northern Long Fist. The Northern Long Fist is Taiji. If you take a posture from Northern Long Fist, like that, and then you just say, okay, I'm going to let some air out the tires. You have Yang style Taiji, right? Or even Chen style Taiji. Because all of the Northern Long Fist postures are the same names, the same characteristics as Taiji, just softened, just let some air out. But I don't think that's true of Hop-kun. I think Hop-kun is not from that. I think Hop-kun is from possibly influenced by the Pigua style. So check that one out if you haven't seen it. Okay, I think we are time. I've been waffling for more than 45 minutes. I'm going to save some questions for next time. But guys, please, I really, really like the questions. They're excellent questions this week, and send me more because I learn from that. What do we have? Kelly's one about the sword history. I'm going to save that one for when I actually have some dates and some stuff in front of me, because history is not my strong point. But a long time. It's a long time is the answer. Anything else? Because I'm going to call it. Just some possible useful info. For those who have a similar style store, the Taiji Do looks very close to the Hapgar Gim Do. The Yang style Taiji Saber. You're talking about the Yang style Taiji Saber. It's very similar shape. Yeah. But the weight is different. I have a Yang style Taiji Saber here. At least the one I've got doesn't feel quite right for the Hapgar sword form. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just the one I've got is too heavy. But the Taiji sword that the Hapgar Dangim Do was more flexible. So, okay. That's it for tonight. And thanks again for your questions. Keep sending them in. And more next time, more next week. Thanks for those of you that support me on Patreon or through the Academy. Check out the links for the Patreon. And that's it. And for the Academy, tomorrow we have a Zoom lesson. So anyone wants me to check their forms and give you some feedback and correction, tomorrow, Zoom lesson. Thanks for this. Thank you all. Thanks, Esther, Mike, Kelly, and thank you, Jonesy, Sean. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Michael, Fujiao, Jonesy. Thank you. Appreciate it. Christine and Mike. All right. I'm going to call it there. And same time, same back channel. And I'll send you the links for the next week's Waffles and Nuggets. I'll send you on the Patreon or inside the Academy. And see you next time. Thank you all.